I got some letters from other countries today. I don't know if you saw on my Facebook, a man wrote in from Kenya and got saved listening to our broadcast, and he is now a preacher of the gospel. And he wrote to tell Emmaus, thank you for reaching over into the continent of Africa and bringing him the gospel of Jesus Christ. He's watching right now, and so are millions of other people. Let's welcome him to our broadcast today. Thank you so much. I'm reading today from the book of Mark, chapter number 8. I want to begin reading with verse number 34, please. Mark chapter 8 and verse number 34. And when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. But whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. And he asked a question. He asked two of them. For what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or, another question. What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? When you read Mark chapter number 8, Jesus is talking about discipleship here and our willingness to lay down our lives, our ambitions, and our own self-desires to follow him. But then he equated their self-denial to finances. It's amazing how he linked the two together. Because in another verse, Jesus said, you either live for God or you live for mammon. And mammon is a type of money, finances, greed, the world. So everybody has to make a decision on why you're alive. And God narrows it down to one or two things. You can either be living for greed or you can be living for God. And so I got to looking at this in the context of finances, and it brought me to the title of my message today. I want to preach on asking you a question. What is your true net worth? What are you worth today sitting here in this church? Our text reveals to us that it is possible for somebody to gain the wealth of this old nasty world. But you always remember the desire and love for money must be kept in check because it can lead to greed and misconduct. There's nothing wrong with having money as long as money doesn't have you. Because you remember, according to 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, the love of money is still the root or the beginning or the origination of all evil. What are you worth today if I were to pull all your assets together? The terminology net worth means the total sum of all your possessions and all your assets being put together. That includes money, investments, houses and land, automobiles, real estate, and anything of any value, which could include collectibles, jewelries, and antiques. If we were to take everything you've got and put it together, I wonder what you would be worth today. Studying the statistics of finances in America, this is what they say your net worth should be in your age category. From being born to the time you're 35, you should have the assets of $6,900. From the ages of 35 to 44, you should have assets of $45,740. This is money or assets on hand. From 45 to 54, you should have $100,404. And that's true till the grandkids come. From 55 to 64, you should have at least a total asset of $164,498. So by looking at those numbers and looking at your face right now, I think all of us would admit we're below average on our net worth. So I looked up the 5 richest people in the world and wondered what they would be worth today. The richest man in the world is named Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the founder of Amazon. Today, he's worth $108.6 billion. Bill Gates is the second richest man in the world. He's worth $106.7 billion. He's the founder of Microsoft. Bernard Arnault family is worth $105.7 billion, and they make the world's most luxurious goods that are sold around the world. Warren Buffett is the 4th richest man in the world at $85.5 billion, and he's known as the world's best investor and trader. The youngest one and the upcoming one that has really just scratched the surface of his life is Mike Zuckerberg. He founded Facebook. And because of crazy people like you that won't get off of it, he's worth $72.9 billion. Did you notice your name was not in the top 5 and neither was mine? But I learned years ago as a child of God, and please get this statement, the net worth of somebody's life cannot be totaled until you include the things that you have that money cannot buy. You might be richer and wealthier than you think today. There are some things in life that even the most wealthiest people in the world do not possess. But here we sit out in the country in Northeast Tennessee, and we are blessed with certain possessions in our life that probably most of the 5 that I just mentioned to you being the most wealthy have never, ever experienced or have in their possession. So with this attitude of thanksgiving that we have once a year, I think one way we could be thankful is to just sit down and kind of add up some of the things that we have that rich people can't have. And I'd rather have these things than money anyhow, because there are some things that money cannot buy. Money may make life easier for you, but money will never make you happy. Let me mention some things that I think we have that are priceless. Number one, if you have a secure home, if you have a secure and a safe home, did you know that's something money can't buy? The Bible said in Psalm chapter 127 and verse number 1, except the Lord build a house, they that build it labor in vain. There is no amount of money that can guarantee anybody a stable and a safe home. And I'd rather live in an old shack without running water and electricity and have God and peace and serenity and safety and security than to live in a mansion and have hell every time I walk in the door. So if you've got a good home, you young people, if you've got a good bed to sleep in, clothes on your back, shoes on your feet, food on the table, and a mom and dad that works every day and pays the bills and takes care of you and makes sure you have your needs met, you ought to get up and thank God every day, because you're a lot richer than most people are in this world. I was raised in the ghetto of millions of people. My daddy was a hard-working man, but he had a drinking problem. My grandfather spent most of his adult life in the penitentiary for murder. And my family knew nothing about God or the Bible. And right next to the house we lived in the ghetto, right next door was a beer joint. And the only thing between that little corner beer joint and our house was the parking lot where the drunks would park. And I remember as a little boy sitting out on the front porch with my dad, and we would watch the drunks come in and go out on Friday and Saturday nights. I was about 10 years old, and I was sitting on the steps. And it was summertime, and I'll never forget, the door was open and only the screen door was closed on the beer joint, and the jukebox was blaring through that screen door, and it was getting dark and late. And a little boy, he couldn't have been no older than I was, pulled up in front of that beer joint on a little old bicycle with the old solid rubber tires. Do you remember them? And all he had on was a pair of shorts. He didn't have on any shoes. He didn't have on any shirt. All he had on was a pair of shorts. And he couldn't have been any older than I was. And I watched him as he pulled up in front of that beer joint. He got off the bike and laid it down. I noticed he must have been instructed not to ever go in it, because he stood at the door. He shooed some of the flies away and put his little face up against the screen. And I heard him say, "Daddy! Daddy!" He was yelling because the jukebox were playing and the drunks were screaming and laughing and dancing. And the little boy had put his hands over his mouth and said, "Daddy!" And in just a few minutes in his work uniform, a drunk dad staggered out of the screen door. And I heard the boy say, "Daddy, I didn't want to come. But the baby don't have any milk. It's hungry." And I told Mommy I didn't want to come down here because I don't want to whip it. But she said, "We got to have milk for the baby. You got paid today, and Mama wants to know, can I have enough milk money to buy milk for the baby?" And in a drunken stupor, I watched that man take his belt off and throw that boy across that little old bicycle and beat him till the blood ran down his back. Picked him up by the hair of the head, put him back on that bicycle, and sent him home without a penny in his pocket. So the next time you think you got it bad, and the next time you look at Hollywood and television, these rich teenagers and people that have made millions, and you don't think you have anything, just remember when you lay down at night, you got a daddy that loves you. You got a mama that wants to take care of you. You got a roof over your head, and you got God in your home. I say to you, you're richer than what you think you are when you have the security of a good home. Number two, your net worth may be more than you think if you got strong health. The Bible talks in the book of Jeremiah, chapter number 8, it talks about having a time of health on this earth. Many wealthy people that have died because of diseases would have given everything they ever owned away and picked up cans on the side of the road if they could just purchase more time on this earth. Health is a wonderful experience that is never appreciated until it's gone. Queen Elizabeth said on her deathbed many years ago, all my possessions would I give for just another moment of life. 1/3 of the world's population are considered to have either bad or failing health. 1/3 of the world's population is in bad health. It's good to be able to get out of the bed this morning. It's good to walk across the floor. It's good to be able to see you. It's good to be able to hear the songs with my ears. It's good to be able to walk and talk, shake your hand, and fellowship. If you got out of bed this morning, you're one blessed man. You're one blessed girl. Oh, it's a blessing to have health. And if you don't believe it, all you need to do is go visit a hospital, a nursing home, one of these clinics, or a funeral home, and you'll realize just how wonderful it is to be alive upon the face of this earth. Being a Christian is not somebody sitting around saying, I want to die, I want to die, I want to die. You're not a Christian, you're crazy. A Christian is somebody that enjoys the life that they have in Jesus with the blessed assurance that if they die, they know they did what the Bible said to do to go to heaven. But God came that we might have life and that we might have it more abundantly. We ought to be the happiest people on the face of the earth. I'm glad I can walk. I'm glad I can talk. I'm glad I can still taste food. I'm glad I can still drive a car. Woo! I tell you, being healthy is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to be healthy. Many people here suffer in their bodies and plunge through pain just to get here. I remember when Miss Judy was having her last shoulder surgery. She said to me, Brother Kid, I really don't want this surgery. And the socket of her shoulder was gone. And she said, I really don't want the surgery. I don't want the pain. And she said, the only reason why I'm letting them do surgery to fix my shoulder is because I don't want to quit cleaning the church. And I'm willing to go through that pain and have that surgery as long as me and my husband don't have to quit cleaning the church. And I've watched her push through pain and agony. I tell you, man, if you don't have pain in your body today, you ought to be on your feet saying glory to God. If you're not taking a handful of medicine, you ought to be saying hallelujah. If you've never had joint replacement, you ought to be saying glory to God. If you're not eat up in arthritis, you ought to say amen. If your heart's not failing today, if you can breathe air, if you can enjoy God, if you can hear the birds, if you can feel the sunshine, I tell you, I'm one rich man. Strong in our health. Number 3, your net worth may be more than you think if you are shared with true love. True love is a wonderful thing. By the way, it's not the concept of Hollywood love. You die of AIDS fooling with that kind of love. 1 John chapter 3 verse 11 said that we are to love one another. Did you know love is a feeling? Did you know love is the human race's strongest emotion in the world. Love refuses to be confined, contained, denied, or diverted. Love consists of bearing, caring, daring, and sharing. If a person lives and has all the money in the world but does not know the experience of being truly loved by somebody, then you have lived a life in vain. Real love. When I get to this time of year, it always reminds me I was going to a cancer hospital for children. And there were so many children, Brother Glenn, in this hospital with cancer. They come from all over the world. That they had taken the rooms and put a curtain in the middle of the room and divided it in half where they could put 2 kids in the room instead of 1. And they were still on cots and beds out in the hallways. I've never seen anything like it. And I would go in there and the Christmas music's playing and the Christmas trees are in the vestibule of the hospital. And then you turn the corner and here's a little kid with no hair in a wagon thrown up in a little plastic dish headed for another chemo treatment. Following that wagon is a little broken-hearted mama with bloodshot eyes, dark bags under her eyes. She's cried till she can't cry no more. And those people go through there, and many of them make it through it, and thank God many of them are healed. But there's one common denominator. Over all the death, over all the chemo, over all the sickness, there's one thing about that hospital that always stood out to me. There was just love. Just everybody seemed to be in love. What's your story? How's your kid? How's the treatments going? I didn't know that day, Brother Guy, but that day that I went, that I'm going to tell you about, changed my life forever. They gave me the room of a little girl that was dying of cancer. She was 4. They were kids everywhere. I mean, hundreds of kids. And I don't know why, but the lady at the desk gave me the wrong room number. So I turned left and I went into the room, and there was a church there. And the church family had come, and they were giving baby dolls to every girl and little fire trucks to every boy in the hospital for Christmas. And so I didn't know it, Brother Charles, but they were right behind me with the toys. And I turned left, and I went in this room, and I looked, and there were 2 little girls there, and they looked to be about maybe 7 and 9 years old. Neither one of them had any hair. Both of them had IVs hanging out of their arms. And you could smell death when you walked in the room. I looked, and there were 2 sets of parents just hugging each other, shaking, waiting for the next report from the doctor and the blood test. About that time, the people from the church came in behind me with the baby dolls. This is love. You young people listening, I'm about to tell you what love is. And they came in, and I kind of backed off because I was in the wrong room, but the family thought I was with them, so I just kind of blended in. I didn't know what to do. And they took the baby dolls, and they gave one to the girl in the far room, and she was so weak she couldn't lift her hands to get it. They just had to lay it in her bosom. And they went to give the baby doll to the other girl that was closest to the door. And my life was about to be changed. Without a hair on her head and the smell of vomit in her throat, she looked at that lady and said, "Ma'am, you didn't have to do this. You don't even know me. Thank you so much for the baby, but my girlfriend is real sick. And I don't think she's going to live. And if it wouldn't hurt your feelings, would you give her my baby too? Because when she dies, I want her to have a baby in each arm." And I couldn't hold it, Brother Gills. I ran out of the room, and I stood there in the hallway with tears running down my face. And here's a little girl not feeling well, the only gift she's ever going to probably get that year. And she's saying, "Give it to her. She's sicker than I am, and maybe it'll make her feel better." I turned to walk down the hallway, and there was a mama leaning up against the wall, and she had a little girl. She couldn't have been 4 months old, little frilly dress and a bow in her hair, and she's leaning up against the wall going, "No, no, no, no." I went up to her, and I said, "Ma'am, are you all right?" She said, "No, I'm not all right." I said, "I'm a preacher. Can I pray with you?" She said, "Preacher, I made a mistake. And I had a baby out of wedlock, and this is my baby. This is my life. This is what I live for." And I think she told me she was 4 months old, and she had a little dress on. It just looked like a porcelain doll. And she said, "The doctor just told me my baby's got leukemia. Oh, preacher, please, don't let my baby die. Don't let my baby die." I'm telling you, if you got somebody that really loves you, if you got somebody that'll call you and check on you, that'll text you and say, I'm praying for you, you need anything, you call me first, I want to be your friend. Let me tell you what a friend is. It's somebody you find standing next to you when they have every reason not to be. That's what you call a real friend. And if you got one of them, I'm going to tell you one thing, buddy. If you got one of them in your life, you got something worth more than this whole world will ever offer you. No wonder the Bible said that Jesus is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. When you can share true love, you're one blessed person. Number 4, quickly I must hurry. If you have satisfying peace in your soul today, Ephesians 2:14, the Bible said, for he is our peace. Peace is the ability to be calm and restful in spite of our surroundings and our circumstances. There is a deep settled peace that can only come from God. And sometimes it's so evident when the world looks at us, they think we're crazy because everything's falling apart, but we've still got a song. I was reading a life story today and I started weeping. And I told my wife, I was sitting there crying in the living room, I said, I've never read this story that I just don't break down weeping. It was in 1875. The 7th of 12 children was born in a little town in Missouri. His daddy was a Baptist preacher, so you know he was mean as a snake. He was raised poor, and at the age of 10, he was informed by his daddy that he would have to start buying all of his own clothes and shoes. He began to work in a department store and learned how to buy and sell and trade goods. So as a young man, J.C. Penney started his first store. When it rose to his peak in his mid-30s, I think it was, he had risen from nothing, from being in a preacher's home, to owning 1,400 stores that was worth, back in the early 1920s, over $40 million. But in 1929, the stock market crashed. It went to nothing. And in one day, he not only lost 1,400 stores, he not only lost $40 million, it also left him $7 million more in debt. It was more than he can handle. His home fell apart, his business fell apart, and he had walked away from God. His prosperity had caused him to drift from the Lord. And he was in such despair that in December of 1931, he entered a mental ward in Battle Creek, Michigan. A total nervous breakdown, lost his mind, dead broke, owed $7 million, and not a dime in his pocket. He had drifted from God. He'd forgot how to pray. And one day while in the insane asylum, he got up and he heard some commotion in the hallway. And he got up and he went down there, and a little band was setting up their instruments. He didn't know who it was or who they were with or what they were going to sing about. And they reared back, and he couldn't believe it. They began to sing his daddy's favorite song, God will take care of you. His spiritual peace that had left him years ago because of prosperity and sin flooded his soul. He went back to his little barrack and fell on his knees beside a little old simple cot and told Jesus Christ that he didn't care if he ever had a dime the rest of his life, but he wanted to have the rest of his life with the peace of God that passes all understanding, because I've had $40 million and I didn't have peace, and I'd rather be broke in a mental ward and have the peace of God than to have $40 million back in my pocket again. Mr. J.C. Penney lived to be 95 years old. When he died, he owned 2,053 department stores. Its worth today would break over $30 billion. When he was on his deathbed at the age of 95, one of his grandchildren came to him and said, Papa, if you had to do life over again, what would you do? At that point, Brother Tyler, he was given 75 cents out of every dollar he made to the Lord. 75 cents out of every dollar J.C. Penney made, he gave to the church. On his deathbed, his grandson leaned over and said, Papa, if you could do life over again, what would you do different? He said, I'd give more money to the Lord. Because the Lord gave me something that 1,400 stores could not give me. The Lord gave me something $40 million could not give me. The Lord's given me something $30 billion could not give me. And that's the peace that I have in my soul. And it's worth more than the whole world has to offer. If you got peace in your heart, you're richer than what you think. Number 5, and I'm done. If you possess the surety of heaven, you're one rich individual. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 22 says that we have full assurance of faith. If everything you live for right now will end when you die at the grave, you have wasted your entire life. I want to live for something that when I take my last breath, it will follow me beyond the tombstone. And the only thing that'll do that is salvation and faith in Jesus Christ. Because when everybody and everything has left you down and they pull the plug and your body ceases to breathe, Jesus is going to be the only thing that matters anyhow. I'll close with this illustration. I used to preach for a fella. He's dead now. He was a rebel, but his mother was a godly woman. And she would make him go to church when he lived at home. So when he got old enough, he ran away because he's tired of all that church stuff. Mom would shout and it'd embarrass him to death. She'd run the aisles and just wave her hands, and he said, I just want to die. So when he got older, he got up and he left. And for years, he ran from God and ran from Mom. He got word years later, still a rebel, that Mom was dying in the nursing home. So over by the pool, loaded up and said, I need to see Mom before she dies. He said, Brother Kid, I walked inside that little old saw that frail body laying in that little old nursing home room. She was shriveled up to nothing. He said, I looked at my mom and tried to talk to her, and he said she wouldn't answer a thing I said. And the nurse came in and said she hadn't spoke for days. He said, but she kept staring at the ceiling, but for some reason to me it looked like she was looking beyond that 8-foot ceiling. And he said, I stood there a rebel away from God. And he said, I looked in the face of my mother, and this is what my mother said when she died. She had not spoke for days. I looked at that little shriveled, silver-haired lady laying there in that bed, and my mother went, Glory! What a city! And died. He said it like that drove me crazy. I knew my mama was ready for that place, and I wasn't. He said, I joined the military and decided I'd go to Germany. I'd get away from Mom and all that influence she'd give me down through the years. He said, they asked me to go out drinking, and I'd never really drunk before, but he said, yeah, go to a pub if it'll get my mind off of this God and Mama stuff. And he said, I went down to a beer joint, and he said, I sat down. I didn't even know how to order beer in Germany. And he said, give me a big glass of beer. And the guy brought him a glass of beer, the bartender. And he leaned over the bar and said, hey, sir, can I ask you a question? He said, yeah. He said, you're new here. He said, I've never been here before. He said, can I ask you a personal question? Have you ever been saved? The guy said, look, man, you a bartender asking me how do you know I'm not saved? He said, I don't know. Said, there've been some Marines out there passing out little booklets on going to heaven. And he said, I'm a bartender, and I've been picking them things up and reading them. And he said, man, I'm going to hell. And he said, I was just wondering, does anybody ever ask you if you were saved? He said, I went to put that glass up to my lip, and I could hear Mama say, Glory! What a city. He said, I threw that beer down. He said, I couldn't touch that. He said, I ran out of that beer joint. I was running down the road thinking, here I am in Germany, and I still can't get away from Mama. He said, I was walking the streets with my hands in my pockets. He said, every step I took, I could hear Mama say, Glory! What a city. He said, about 3 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't take it anymore. He said, I went running into my barracks. He said, I was on the bottom bunk and I slid up under the bed. He said, everybody thought I'd lost my mind. They started piling out of the bunks and said, Pooh, what's wrong with you? He said, shut up, I'm trying to get saved. And he said, while he was under the bed, he said, while I was under the bed, one of the sergeants came in and grabbed me by the heels and pulled me from under that bed and said, Poole, what have you got to say for yourself? He said, Glory! What a city! I'm telling you, bless God Almighty, I'd rather know my name is in the Lamb's Book of Life. Oh, I'd rather know I'm ready to meet God than to own this whole world. Let's give the Lord a hand clap of praise in His house today.
These are the days of